Hello and welcome into a Week 15 version of Empty the Notebook. I'm Evan Washburn. She is Aditi Kinkhabwala. This is the show where we take you onto the sidelines, into the production meetings, and into the airport, Aditi. We got to start with travel stories. I had a tough road back from what should be a quick trip from Cleveland. I was there for Chiefs Browns yesterday. You made the trip from Denver. I want to start with you because that can be tricky sometimes. Did you red eye it? Was it a pink eye? Was it an early morning? How'd we go?
You know what? Your favorite airline came through for me. Southwest had a flight at 7:45 p.m. out of the Denver airport, got me into Pittsburgh a little bit after midnight, about 12:30 a.m. The flight was actually on time. The Denver airport was great. And so I'd love to sit here and complain, but I'm still fascinated. I will say this. I'm still really intrigued to see what happens when Southwest moves to assigned seating after the new year, because there's a lot of pre-board, I don't want to call them shenanigans, but there are a lot of pre-boarding things going on Southwest. But other than that, no complaints.
It will be a game changer. I actually got an email from him today about how I will still be taken care of as a valued member of the Southwest class. And they got me home this morning, Aditi, because I was on another airline. And look, maintenance happens, but it was one of those things where it started to snowball, delays. I'm sitting at the airport having a few drinks, watching some games. Then all of a sudden you're not getting home tonight. And I don't know if you've been there yet. This is, I think, your second or third year on the sidelines, but you've traveled enough. It's a pretty demoralizing feeling, especially after a long weekend away. But had a quick night's sleep at the airport hotel, got out there early this morning. And again, Southwest brought me home. So it was the first cancellation of the season, made it to Week 15. So it feels like a win.
I will just say this. That happened to me last year. Kansas City playoffs, the coldest game that I have ever been at. Could not get home to Pittsburgh. And the caveat was that my husband had left for France. So I had an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I was in Kansas City. Actually, I did get to Chicago at some point. That was a little dicey, but knock on wood, we don't have a repeat of that one.
Perfect segue to Kansas City, which is often described as the Paris of the Midwest. And they took on the Cleveland Browns yesterday. And I was on the sideline for that one. And Aditi, the big story out of this wasn't that they picked up win number 13. It was, again, an ugly win. It's a grind right now offensively. The defense was fantastic. They picked off Jameis a bunch. They had 6 takeaways. But the right ankle for Patrick Mahomes is a real concern right now as they head into a short week. They have the Texans on Saturday and then a quick turnaround to face the Steelers on the road on Christmas Day, that Wednesday. And this was a game where Mahomes, again, was grinding through it just from a performance standpoint. He was 50% completion. It was just a slog to get yards, to get points. They finally had some separation. And then late in this one, he gets tied up as he tried to step up into the pocket, and that right ankle had some body weight on it. Now, initially, he spatted it up and was limping on the sideline. And I was given the sense from the sideline that if he wanted to or needed to, or they felt like they needed Mahomes to finish that game, he would have done so. And he actually lent his words to that in the post-game press conference. But now the big question is, will he play Saturday? Should he play Saturday? Should he play moving forward? We know he has a history with ankle problems, and he is a quick healer. He's been able to come back from these type of injuries in the past. My sense of it, Aditi, and then I'll get what your thoughts on this, is that if he's anywhere close to being able to play, he will play Saturday against the Texans. Again, this is just my opinion, but knowing his history and his ability to play through pain, and also what's still on the line is the Bills win yesterday in Detroit. They really want the 1 seed. That came up in our meetings with the Chiefs. They have so much value placed in, 1, the bye, and what that does for them, and then 2, playing at Arrowhead. So if there's any chance Mahomes can play, I feel like he will play, and I do think he should play.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because Mike Tomlin loves to say we don't want to turn a small problem into a big problem. So does it in fact turn into a situation where Andy Reid is protecting the player from himself? And we know that Patrick Mahomes is always going to argue to get out there. But does Andy Reid say, you know what, we need you for a full 6, 8 weeks right now, whatever. I'm obviously doing a terrible job with the math of the playoffs and the end of the season,
It's okay.
but we'll see. Thanks. I appreciate that. I hope my mom's not watching, my math professor mom. I had an interesting situation like that in my game too, and that was with Pat Surtain, because Pat Surtain seemingly did something on his ankle on an interception, got taped in the break, went back in, and then did something more significant with the ankle, and ultimately came out for the last 3 minutes. And the Broncos have a short week, so something to pay attention to. But I do want to talk about the Broncos because, look, this was a huge game. It was arguably the most meaningful game the Broncos have played in Denver since that Super Bowl season 9 years ago. And things did not look good early, Evan. Bo Nix, who I could not speak more highly of, threw 3 interceptions. Bo Nix, who all season long we've said has had the poise, has looked comfortable. The moment has never been too big for him. It was almost like the moment was a little bit too big for him. He never quite looked relaxed in the pocket. But here's what made me come away feeling better about the Broncos than I did going in, Evan. That defense stepped up and stepped up so well. Anthony Richardson has been playing so well for the Colts since that benching and that return. Anthony Richardson couldn't get anything going. He couldn't buy a completion. He couldn't even do anything with his legs, really. And that Colts run game was essentially bottled up, although we'll get to that Jonathan Taylor touchdown that wasn't at some point. And the special teams, they got a huge return from Marvin Mims when moving the ball were so hard to come by. Marvin Mims has this enormous punt return that leads to some points. And again, I'll say this, we talk about winning ugly. It's not about style points. It's just about the W's. This is not the old BCS system where your wins are weighted. A win is a win is a win. But for the Broncos, this quote unquote ugly win was actually probably extra valuable because a defense that hadn't been good against Cleveland a week ago really rebounded well. And there's a lot of confidence to be gleaned from the fact that you can win in different ways. And also, Evan, I don't think Bo Nix is going to make a 3 interception outing a regular occurrence.
Yeah, it's almost good that he just got that out of his system. He's played so well up to this point, and I think at times has been risk averse. So this is a game where he probably had some mistakes, some mental errors, and he'll learn from it. I want to give you paint the picture for you of, as I'm waiting for that flight that I think is just delayed before it's canceled. I'm sitting there, I've got the AirPods in, I'm watching your game on my iPad. And when Nick Bonito stepped in front of that pass on the throwback, or whatever you want to call it, and ran into the end zone, I had an audible sound, and people kind of looked around me in the bar. And it was a fun game to watch because there were some swings. And as you touched on, some clearly interesting, questionable moments, whether it was Jonathan Taylor's drop there at the goal line or some play calls. So a fun game and a busy Sunday, and we're just getting started. Coming up next, though, we're going to empty the notebook, get into some stories that maybe we weren't able to dive into deeply during our broadcast. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook, the show that not just takes you on the sidelines and on the travel circus that is our lives, but also into the notebook and some of the things and stories and pieces of information that we learn over the course of our prep for a game. And some of that, Aditi, doesn't make it on the air. But this week, you really cracked open the notebook. You dove deep on these two quarterbacks, their journey, and a connection with both organizations to a Hall of Famer and Peyton Manning. So what didn't make air yesterday that you think's worth getting into?
Well, and that's exactly it, Evan. I was looking to sort of, as you said, get a little deeper. And when you think about the Broncos and the Colts facing off with these two young quarterbacks, and Bo Nix is obviously a rookie. Anthony Richardson sort of lost his rookie season, and considering his experience, 14 total starts in the NFL now, is essentially a rookie. And both of them are trying to be the heir apparent in taking these organizations to a place that they last went on the arm of Peyton Manning. So I called Peyton Manning, and he was tremendous.
Yeah, you did. Good job.
He was awesome in giving me his thoughts on these quarterbacks, on their development, on the coaching they're getting so far, what he sees for them. But here was something that was really cool. I asked him, when was your light bulb moment your rookie year? And of course, Peyton Manning played every single snap that rookie year. He went 3-13. He threw an awful 28 interceptions. Random aside, that still bothers him, Evan. He said to me, as he's telling me the story, he goes, wouldn't you think that in a 17-game season, someone would break that record? But during that season, he went out to San Francisco and he said, we lost, of course, because of course they lost 13 times, but they lost 34-31. And he threw, in his memory, 3 touchdowns in that game. And he said after the game, Steve Young came up to him and said, you're on the right track. This game is going to slow down for you soon. And Peyton said after that, he just felt like, you know what? I can do it here. I do have a sense of what it's supposed to look like, and I can make that happen. So backtrack. On Friday, when we were meeting in the Broncos facility with Bo Nix and with Sean Payton, we're talking about the light bulb moment for Bo Nix. And Sean Payton starts telling us about that Chiefs game. As you remember, the Broncos went out to Kansas City. They did end up losing, but they lost only 16-14 because of a blocked field goal at the end of the game. And after the game, Patrick Mahomes goes up to Sean Payton first and he says, you got yourself a QB, don't you? And then he goes up to Bo Nix and he says, you and I are going to have a lot of great games. And the way Sean Payton said, that lit up Bo Nix. Like, okay, I do belong here, is exactly how Peyton Manning was saying the words from Steve Young lit him up and set him off. So I wish we had a chance to tell that story. I wish we got to talk about Bo Nix's comfort level and how much he's grown and his confidence in the fact that he does indeed belong. We didn't, but that's why we have this show, right, Evan? So we get to tell it here.
No doubt. And I just hope one day I can have somebody believe in me the way that Sean Payton clearly believes in Bo Nix. Because going back to the training camp season, you and I are talking, we're watching everything. I mean, I've never heard somebody talk so much positive vibes, thoughts about a quarterback. And look, it's real and it's true and it's obviously working. So my empty the notebook here, Aditi, you'll appreciate this because we all have our journey to where we are, how you got to where you are, how I got to where I am. And you need some moments, some luck early on. So Kevin Stefanski, he finishes up at Penn. He was a safety on the football team in December of 2004. And he goes, like many of the Ivy League or some of those institutions, into more financially focused fields. So he was working commercial real estate in downtown Philly, as he put it, taking the train in. He's got his tie, he's working in the office, and he's thinking to himself, what am I doing with my life? And he gets a call in the spring from his former director of ops at Penn, James Urban. If you know, he goes on to be a coach in the league for a while. But at this point, he's Andy Reid's assistant. I mean, truly just his assistant. And he offers Stefanski a opportunity to be an intern the summer of 2005 for the Philadelphia Eagles up in Bethlehem at Lehigh. So Kevin jumps at it because he can't wait to get out of the office and stop cold calling or answering phones or whatever you're doing in commercial real estate at that level. And so he works that training camp. 2005 training camp, as Kevin reminded us, that's the summer of TO, the doing weights in the driveway and all the tension with Donovan McNabb. I mean, so he got thrown right into the cauldron of drama in Philly. And he said it was incredibly impactful to him, recognizing that's where he was supposed to be. He got to drive Andy Reid to practice once. He said that was a big deal. But he just observed. And the biggest aspect of it, Aditi, is he met Brad Childress there, who was an assistant on that staff. And it became clear to Brad that, man, this Stefanski kid's got something. And so Kevin, after that summer, goes back to Penn, works for the football team for a little bit. And then when Brad, who's on your screen right now, gets the job in Minnesota, he calls up Stefanski and says, hey, do you want to be my assistant? So that job that James Urban had with Andy in Minnesota, and that's how he got his start in the NFL. And Kevin said that assisted to the head coach job. He said he learned more from that role in terms of what is required to be a head coach than any other role he's had, whether it's position coach or coordinator. And it's part of a larger story that I'd love to tell at some point. And I know you know this too. the lineage, the tree of being an assistant to Andy Reid as their
Yes.
when he's head coach. It includes Brett Veach, Sean McDermott, as I mentioned, James Urban, who's an accomplished head coach. I mean, you can put Stefanski in that mix based off of this connection. So it's, again, to me, those are the fun. How does this guy get here story that we don't often understand, because we just see them once they become the hotshot coordinator or the head coach on Sundays.
You're totally right. Isn't John Harbaugh part of that tree too?
Well, he worked for Andy. He never had that assistant to the head coach job. He
Oh, we're
came in,
just
I
talking
think,
about that title.
in more of a special teams role. But there's some other guys I'm forgetting. I mean, Veach and McDermott are the two big ones. And he's got guys, Porter Elliott in Kansas City right now, who's up and coming assistant. So it's again, it's a job that is as low as there is on the ladder. But if you can survive and thrive in it, it often is the launching pad to making a living in the NFL.
And to what Kevin said, what better bird's eye view do you get of the day-to-day of a coach's life than being that person's assistant, than being the head coach's assistant? So yes, absolutely great training. And Evan, you know that people believe in you. You're the one that's constantly said is the example for me. So come on now.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, we'll see if there's a penalty here coming up on that or anything else. Stay with us here on Empty the Notebook. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook. Evan and Aditi with you. And we end the show same way every week. We throw some flags or we keep them in the pocket. The way this works, we'll each present a statement to one another and we decide, is that a penalty? Disagree with it, you throw the flag. So Aditi, you're up first. The Bucs are a dangerous team that people maybe aren't paying enough attention to right now as we get close to a playoff push.
Sitting on the flag for that one. And Baker Mayfield doesn't even need to wake up feeling dangerous for this to be a dangerous team. Look, the Bucs beat the Eagles. The Bucs beat the Lions. The Bucs, without arguably two of their best players, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, pushed the Chiefs to overtime. Now, there are some injury concerns, of course, but these Bucs are very well coached. They're sound. They have a tremendous run game. The defense is tough. And you already know how I feel about Baker. So, yes, the Bucs are dangerous.
I would agree with you. And I'd keep the flag in the pocket. And I was stunned, not just by what they did yesterday, but when you look at what they've done the last few weeks, and they've got a nice walkway or entry into the playoffs with their last three games being against teams without winning records. So what do you got for me?
Okay, how about this one? Caleb Williams, who we know is in line for a new official head coach in his second season, should have a play calling head coach.
I'm throwing the flag on this one. I'm not gonna think of play caller first when it comes to the Chicago Bears. And yes, Caleb Williams is the biggest priority in terms of what a new head coach would need to do when they come in there to make sure that you maximize what is an incredibly talented player. But the Bears need an absolute culture overhaul. I mean, that's a place that has just seemed rudderless recently, and it demands someone to come in with not only ability to run an offense and lead an offense or lead a defense, but lead a building. They need a CEO. And it's, in my mind, a guy I saw yesterday in Cleveland. I think Mike Vrabel would be perfect for that job. He's not a play caller necessarily, could call a defense. I think Mike could probably call an offense in terms of just how smart he is. But that's what my priority would be if I was making that decision in Chicago with Caleb Williams as part of that decision-making process. So I'm throwing the flag on that one.
Okay, and I don't disagree with you there, but I would give you a little caveat here. Caleb Williams will be on most likely his third play caller when he starts his second season. This is what Bryce Young is on. Bryce Young is on his third play caller in a year and a half. This is coaching malpractice when it comes to these young quarterbacks. So if your head coach is not the play caller, which I agree with you is not necessary, you need to have a plan there. Because if you've got a great offensive coordinator, and look, I'm quoting Peyton Manning right here on this. If you've got a great offensive coordinator who then may likely be plucked by another team, then you better have an OC in waiting to keep that offense consistent. Because when you're throwing these young guys out there and they are having to learn a new system and new verbiage every year or every half year. Look, Baker Mayfield went through, I think, 5 play callers in his first 4 seasons. You're stunting these guys' development. And so no matter what the Bears do, Evan, they do need to make sure they have a plan at play caller if they want to get the most out of Caleb Williams.
Okay, you had some drama in Denver yesterday, I guess last night for some of us on the East Coast. And it brings to light the question. Every stadium in the NFL should have pylon cameras at the goal line to avoid some questions that may exist as to whether or not Jonathan Taylor, in this example, drops the ball before he crosses the goal line. They are not currently in every stadium or available for every game, I should say.
Well, okay, so let's start with this. Get into the end zone before you drop the ball. It is absurd that this keeps happening. And in our game, that completely swung the game. You could have had the Colts up 20-7, and instead the offense basically deflated from there and the Broncos took off. The issue, and we can take our viewers behind the scenes, is based on the rankings of the crews, there are more or less cameras. The highest crews at Fox and at CBS, the primetime crews, all have more cameras than some of the other crews. And so there's not consistency in what shots are available. And so if the NFL mandated that everybody had a pylon cam, at least that piece would be taken care of. And P.S., by the way, really quickly, the Ravens touchdown week 1 might have been a touchdown if that wasn't a primetime game.
Totally. Don't drop the ball at the goal line. That'll do it for us. If you missed an episode or joined us late, you can watch full episodes on the NFL on YouTube channel. Aditi will be in Cincinnati for Browns Bengals. I'll see you from Buffalo, Patriots Bills, Sunday afternoon. Have a great week, everybody.